Welcome to the SCS Library tutorial on recent changes to the APA Publication Manual. The tutorial will cover some of the notable developments that occurred in the APA style in the new 7th edition. We will focus mostly on the area of citation practices, both in terms of lists of references and in-text citations, but we'll also cover basic changes in style rules, as well as in mechanics and formatting. While the tutorial assumes basic familiarity with APA, I would like to remind everyone that the main purpose of the APA Publication Manual is to establish standards for scholarly written communication, especially in the social sciences disciplines. More specifically, the APA Manual offers persuasive guidance regarding formatting papers in social sciences and related fields, addressing stylistic issues within these papers, using consistent citation patterns, as well as preparing manuscripts for publication. As such, the APA Manual is the most heavily used citation style manual here at SCF. The APA's decision to publish the 7th edition of the manual represents a response to the changing landscape of scholarly information, especially the increasing focus on digitally born and digitally available information. It also reflects renewed interest in avoiding biased language and being more inclusive in our writing. The new manual contains more specific guidance for writers of scholarly papers on how to address these highly nuanced issues. In this session, we will focus on 10 of the changes that stand out as the most significant ones for you as students here at SCS. The first 5 changes we will cover relate to the citations of items within the reference list. To begin with, in the 7th edition, URLs in reference lists are no longer preceded by the phrase retrieved from, unless a retrieval date is also needed. The 2 examples on this slide demonstrate the specific implications of that change in relation to citing a database. With the text in red referring to citing URLs in the 6th edition, and the text in green in the 7th edition. Therefore, in the 6th edition, it was customary to write retrieved from https://statista.com. While in the 7th edition, this is shortened to https://statista.com. Along the same lines, the use of digital object identifiers, or DOIs, in reference lists has been standardized, with the freestanding label DOI no longer in use. DOIs are now simply formatted in the same way as URLs. As a reminder, APA recommends providing a DOI whenever it is available because it tends to be a more stable, long-lasting link for online articles than a URL, which can potentially change. DOIs are unique to their documents and consist of a long alphanumeric code. Many publishers will provide an article's DOI on the first page of the document. While the 6th edition allowed for the phrase DOI: alphanumeric code, the 7th edition now consistently uses the phrase https://doi.org/numeric code. Another change that has occurred in the 7th edition of the manual in terms of lists of references of online items relates to the use of website names and web page titles. There is a new mandate for the reference to always include website names that are not identical to the author, and that is after the title of a web page, with the title of the web page itself italicized. In our example, the name of the website, Health Times, is thus presented right after the webpage title, The Future of Aged Care Nursing in Australia, with the webpage title newly italicized. In relation to books, An important change is the new rule to omit the publisher location from a book reference. Looking at our example, while in the 6th edition, it was customary to precede the publisher's name, Anchor Academic Publishing, with its geographic location, Hamburg, Germany. This location is no longer mentioned in the 7th edition reference citation of the same book. An additional significant change concerns the number of authors whose names are explicitly included in a reference citation before an ellipsis. While in the 6th edition, only the first 6 authors were listed before an ellipsis and the final author's name, in the 7th edition, this number has increased to the first 19 authors, followed by an ellipsis and the final author's name or sources with more than 20 authors. At the same time, the rule not to place an ampersand before the final author's name remains in place. On the other hand, when it comes to the number of authors explicitly listed in an in-text citation, the number went down in the 7th edition of the APA manual. In the 6th edition, up to 5 authors' last names used to be listed in the first citation, with subsequent in-text citations mentioning only the first author's last name followed by et al. However, in the new edition, it is only the first author's last name followed by et al. That is mentioned from the very first in-text citation. Correspondingly, in our example, in the 6th edition, the first in-text citation would list all 3 authors, Albrecht, Zielman, and Bury. However, the 7th edition would shorten this reference to Albrecht et al. Please note that for up to 2 authors, all authors would be explicitly mentioned in every in-text citation. As for changes to in-text citations, there is also a new directive in the 7th edition in regards to citing research participants. While the 6th edition did not seem to offer any explicit guidance in that area, the 7th edition, particularly its section 8.36, presents quite detailed rules that may be useful when citing participant statements collected in primary research. The first imperative is to abide by ethical agreements regarding confidentiality and anonymity, and use pseudonyms when needed, as well as to obscure any other identifying information. When it comes to directly quoting the research participants, the rule is then not to include any citation in the reference list because the statements cannot be verified by readers. Instead, writers should explicitly state in the body of their paper that the quotations are from research participants. In the example on our slide, the participant is given a pseudonym, Brenda, which is in double quotation marks, with the phrase 58-year-old female from Maryland added to describe her demographically. The quote from her simply follows after. In terms of stylistic changes, the 7th edition displays a renewed focus on inclusivity and avoiding gender bias, with a corresponding imperative not to use a generic third-person pronoun he or she, but rather they when referring to a singular generic person. For example, instead of writing, "The consumer is expected to troubleshoot the issue by herself or himself," we should say, "The consumer is expected to troubleshoot the issue by themselves or themselves." Please do note the alternative spelling for themselves with the F at the end of the word in the example. This imperative to use they applies also when referring to a specific person rather than a generic person in situations when we do not want to make assumptions about their gender. For instance, transgender or genderqueer individual. The example the 7th edition of the manual uses is Jamie shared their experiences as a genderqueer person. In the area of mechanics, there has been a change in terms of the number of spaces after an end of sentence punctuation. While the 6th edition saw spacing twice after punctuation marks at the end of a sentence as helpful for readers of manuscripts, the 7th edition asks writers to insert just one space after periods or other punctuation marks at the sentence's end. Last but not least, when it comes to formatting papers, the running head, which is the abbreviated version of the paper title, is newly omitted in student papers unless the professor explicitly requests it. Manuscripts being submitted for publication still use a running head, placing it in the page header, flush to the left, and in all capital letters. The label running head is not being included. This concludes our introduction to the recent changes to the APA Publication Manual. Please make sure to consult the manual for additional details. Also, feel free to email us at scslibrary@georgetown.edu or call us at 202-784-7389 for more information.